The wind rolled across the wide Montana plains, carrying the scent of dust, hay, and the faint sweetness of sagebrush. Somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed, restless against the setting sun. Jack Dalton tightened the reins on his bay mare and glanced toward the ranch house. The porch light flickered to life, though the sun hadn't quite set yet. He knew what that meant. His little girl, Annie, was waiting. Jack dismounted, his boots crunching against the gravel drive. He was bone-tired. The fences had needed mending again, and the cattle drive had been rougher than expected. He'd learned to live with exhaustion, it was as much a part of his life as breathing. But what he hadn't learned to live with was the silence. The silence after his wife's laughter had vanished from these walls. The silence at the dinner table, broken only by Annie's chatter and his own quiet nods. The silence in his chest whenever he caught his daughter staring at family photos, as if she could reach through the glass and bring her mama back. "Daddy." Annie burst through the front door, blonde curls flying, her little boots clattering against the porch steps. She ran full speed into his legs. He grunted, caught off guard, then chuckled as he scooped her into his arms. "Easy there, darling," he said, kissing her hair. "You'll knock me flat one of these days." "You're late," she scolded, her green eyes her mama's eyes narrowed. "Fence was down by the south pasture," Jack explained. "Couldn't let the cattle wander." Annie pouted. "Well, you missed supper." "And guess what?" Jack raised a brow. "What?" "I met somebody today." Her little voice was bright, innocent, full of excitement in a way Jack hadn't heard in a long time. Jack carried her up the porch and set her down. "Somebody?" he asked warily. Annie nodded eagerly. "She's new in town, Miss Clara. She was at the store with Mrs. Jenkins, and she helped me reach the sugar jar when it was too high." "And guess what else?" Jack opened the screen door and let Annie slip inside ahead of him. "What else?" "Squirt. She smells like mama." The words hit him like a branding iron to the chest. He froze, hand still on the door frame, unable to move. For a long moment, he could only stare at his daughter, who was now skipping toward the kitchen as though she hadn't just torn open the old wound he carried every day. "She smells like mama," Annie repeated, twirling once before plopping into a chair at the table. Jack swallowed hard, his throat dry as the desert. He wanted to tell her not to say things like that, not to compare strangers to the woman they'd both lost. But how could he? She was only 6 years old. If she found comfort in someone's scent, in some flicker of familiarity, who was he to steal that away? Still, the thought lingered long into the night. The next day, Jack was back in town for supplies. He kept his Stetson low, his voice curt, his movements efficient. He wasn't much for small talk, and people had learned not to push him. But when he stepped into Jenkins' general store, he saw her. Clara. She was crouched by the shelf of flour sacks, speaking softly to Mrs. Jenkins, her hands graceful but steady as she stacked them. Something about her drew his eye. Maybe it was the way she moved, like someone who'd been through storms but still stood tall. Or maybe it was the faint smile she wore, the kind that didn't quite hide the shadows in her eyes. Jack cleared his throat and turned away, forcing himself to focus on the list in his hand. Rope, coffee, feed. That was it. In and out. But then he heard it. "Hi, Mr. Dalton." He turned. Clara was standing there, a gentle smile on her face. She wasn't forward, but she wasn't timid either. "Mom," Jack said with a short nod. "I met your daughter yesterday," Clara continued. "She's a broken bar, something special." Jack's jaw tightened. He hated when folks brought up a new. It felt like they were trying to slip past his defenses. "She is," he said shortly. Clara hesitated, then gave a small nod and stepped back. "Well, it was nice to meet you, Mr. Dalton." Jack tipped his hat and walked past her without another word. But as he pushed through the store's doors, Annie's voice echoed in his mind. "She smells like mama." That night, as he tucked Annie into bed, she whispered, "Dad, your broken bar, can Miss Clara come visit the ranch sometime, please?" Jack sighed, brushing her curls back from her forehead. "Anya, she made me laugh," Annie said softly, her eyes wide and pleading. "Mom, I used to make me laugh, too." Jack's heart clenched. He kissed her head, turned out the light, and stood in the doorway longer than he meant to. Outside, the coyotes sang to the moon, but inside, Jack felt the weight of a choice he wasn't ready to make. Because if he let Clara in, if he let anyone in, he wasn't sure he'd survive losing them, too. But what if Annie was right? What if Clara was the one thing missing from their broken little family? And what if the man who'd sworn he'd never love again a broken bar already had?